Midwest Whitetail is brought to you by Realtree, Hoyt Archery, Fuse Accessories, Muddy Outdoors, Cabela's, Trophy Rock, Scott Archery, Frigid Forage, Rocket Broadheads, Easton Arrows, Redneck Hunting Blinds, Quiet Cat, Non-Typical Wildlife Solutions, Deer Grow, Ozonics, Wilderness Athlete, Grizzly Coolers, RTP Outdoors, and Nikon.
Welcome to Midwest Whitetail. This is the last off-season episode of this year. We'll be taking about a 2-month break, and the next episode that we produce will be around the 20th or so of August. And we take this time in between every year to get refocused and start pulling our content together and our plans and get ready for the long push from the end of August all the way on through the hunting season. So it's, shockingly, we're starting to think about the hunting season being just around the corner. It seems like we just stopped talking about last season, and we're right in the middle of getting ready for the next one. So along those lines, today's episode is going to deal with some public land scouting that Aaron's done using a kayak to get into places that otherwise he wouldn't be able to access. And John's going to talk about how to control weeds in clover, and that's a good topic for this time of the year. And I'm going to go into 2 different deer, and these are deer that are familiar to the viewers of Midwest Whitetail, but I'm going to compare and contrast the personalities and the behaviors of these 2 deer. They're both the same age, killed them both the same year, but they lived completely different lives. So that's our episode. I'm going to dive right into it. Hope you enjoy it. Back out on the public land today. We drove a long ways to a new spot. Been looking at it on a map for quite some time, and just decided to make the trip over here. It's a place we've never hunted before, but it's relates sort of to that same river location that we've been on these past few years. Cool thing with this spot is the little creek that leads in here is really small and shallow. We can't get the canoe in there, so we actually had to bring kayaks in here because the water is only about 4 or 5 inches deep the whole way back. We had to paddle back about 1.25 miles to get where we're at. And this spot is so intriguing to me because it is not accessible unless you bring those kayaks in here. The river's just too muddy. You can't walk down through it. But I was looking at this little area on the map. At the very back edge of the property, off the river a little ways, is this nice thick bedding area that Eric and I are standing in right now. And we actually just we're scouting our way up through here because this is the time of year I like to look at these bedding areas. Now in late winter, we were walking up through here and saw a doe. She walked right over here to this thick stuff, and she hasn't come out yet. She's standing probably 60 yards from us right now. She might just be watching us up here on this hilltop, but where I'm standing, there's a really good trail that sort of leads down from over here to my right, back down to the southeast. There's a bean field out there, thick bedding area. Bean field, right down there where that fence is at, there's going to be a crossing where those deer are going back and forth. So this is really cool. Lots of good sign already. Found a giant rub as soon as we came up the hill, so chances are good that there's a shooter buck in here, and it's a spot not very many people are gonna go to unless they got a kayak. So we're gonna go look at a couple more quick. We were doing a podcast just the other day with Greg Litzinger, and he was talking about hunting bedding areas and trying to define which deer are making those beds whenever you find them. We're scouting a bedding area right now, as you can see, and there's 3 beds right here. There's one big one right there in front of Eric, and then there's another one here, and then there's a small one over here to my right, and they're kind of clustered together. And I'm by no means an expert on this, but when we walked up here, we actually bumped a couple of does and could hear a fawn bawling right down here below us. I mean, it's mid-June right now, so the fawns are really small. chances are that this is a doe family group bedding area right here. And that reiterates what he was saying in that podcast. And that is, whenever you find a mature buck bed, most of the time it's off by itself and it's a really large depression in the grass or wherever you find it at. And right here, this is exactly what he was saying about doe bedding areas. Does tend to cluster together whenever they bed. And that's exactly what we jumped up out of here. You got two big beds that are about 4 or 5 feet apart, and then a small bed that fawn was probably laying in. And this is definitely good intel for this time of year, because does will bed in the same spot throughout the course of a year. So we know that there's some doe family groups in this bedding area. It's going to be a good bet we're going to find a buck in here come November. Another thing that is kind of tricky to spot during the midsummer time period is a scrape tree. And Eric and I just come out of that bedding area behind us. Come up to this tree because it looked like a good candidate for an old rub or something. And actually found this licking branch. And as you can see, this thing has been used probably for a couple of years now. This is on a little oak tree out in the middle of the field, and I brushed back some of this foliage down here. And the ground is actually barren right in here underneath of all this grass where there was a scrape last fall. It's very tough to find this type of sign in the summer unless you really are looking for the fine details. And there's actually another lick right there on that other branch, but pretty good chance this is going to be a good spot come the fall. There's a bunch of trails that lead out of bedding over here to bedding over here. That will make sense why there's a scrape right in between them. So I'm going to keep on going, check for more sign. Well, we're headed out now. Found some pretty good spots way back up in this creek channel, and there's not a lot. The problem with this area is there's not a lot of trees. As you can see, this is all just marsh grass down in here. So Eric and I were sort of looking for spots along this creek where the deer are crossing, because there's a lot of bedding over on this side and there's food over here. So the deer obviously got to cross this little creek, and it's plenty shallow enough for them to do that. But what we're going to have to do is build a ground blind of some sort to shoot the crossing in the middle of the creek. And there's a few small, like scrubby hickory trees back there that full of thorns and stuff. They wouldn't work good for putting a tree stand in, but we may look at setting up a ground blind there later on this season. So we're gonna get out of here for now. The main mission of this trip was accomplished. We learned the property a little bit, found some good locations for trail cameras and tree stands. So we'll be back in here to our little creek channel spot here in the next few months to hopefully do some velvet scouting and set up a trail camera.
Well, it's the first week in June, and Eric and I are out here spraying some clethodim on our first year clover plot. And we want to go over one of the questions that we get asked a lot on the site, and that's what type of herbicide can I use to get rid of weeds in my clover, and how much of the herbicide do I use, and how much water do I use when applying it. And really it's broken down into a pretty simple thing. This is probably about a half-acre plot. We used 5 ounces of clethodim. And this can vary depending on how bad of a grass problem you have. Clethodim is going to kill all your grasses. It's not going to take over your broadleafs. It's just a grass selective herbicide. So this plot in general doesn't have a lot of grass, so we don't really need to nail it with clethodim. Now, if you have a really bad grass problem, usually we recommend between 10 to 15 or 16 ounces per acre, depending on how bad that grass problem is. This one isn't that bad, so we just want to suppress those grasses, let the clover get up, and we'll have a great, outstanding plot to hunt over in the fall. The next question that we get asked is, how much water do I mix with that amount of herbicide? And that's pretty simple thing, is it doesn't matter. If you put 5 ounces of your herbicide in here and you fill this thing up, you just got to make sure that you spray this entire jug over your plot equally. Get it all out and you'll get that kill. So those are some of the questions we get asked. Hopefully that helps you establish a nice food plot to hunt over this fall.
Now I'm going to talk about the G4 buck and Lappy. And these were both deer that got on our radar at the same time, basically 2009. We had some experience with the double G4 buck in 2008, but we weren't hunting him. By 2009, we were actively chasing both of these deer. And what's interesting about these bucks is they started on the same field the same year. They were both living on a certain ridge. When we went up there, we would occasionally, not very often, but occasionally encounter these deer. But let's talk about Lappy first. Lappy started out as what you'd call a management buck. He wasn't a deer that would really grab anybody's attention specifically. He had one strong side and one weak side. And yet, during those times, we had so many big deer on the farm that we didn't really look too hard at management bucks. So Lappy got overlooked. Chad Lathrop was trying to kill him. We had a couple of encounters with Lappy that were close calls. Lappy got away. Okay, so Lappy 2009, first discovery, gets away. Yeah, interesting looking deer, nothing spectacular, management buck. So in 2010, Lappy had moved his range about a quarter of a mile to the west. Now he's living down in a valley, and his antlers actually got a lot more interesting, because now he's got this brow tine that has a sort of a Christmas tree sort of thing growing off of it. Really cool, but if I'm not mistaken, he switched sides. I know he switched sides a couple times between his messed up side and his good side, and I believe in 2010 he flipped from one side to the other. But we figured it was Lappy just because of the characteristics of the antlers and where he was living and the approximate age of the deer. You just don't have that many bucks that look like this. We were really after Lappy pretty hard in 2010. Not specifically, but he was still in an area where we were hunting some other deer. We were hoping that we could get a shot at Lappy. He was, to our knowledge, 100% nocturnal, but we never saw the deer during the day, never got any daytime photos of Lappy. So 2010 came and went. We filed him away in the back of our minds because there were still other big deer that we were hunting. Lappy wasn't the primary target. 2011 comes, and we started picking up pictures of Lappy again, except now he's another quarter mile, roughly to the west. So his home range, or core area, if you want to call it that, has jumped a quarter of a mile in successive years, twice now. In 2011, we did get some video of Lappy during the summer in the same area where we started getting trail camera pictures of him that fall. We didn't get any daytime trail camera pictures during the fall, nor did we get any sightings of Lappy while we were hunting during 2011. Again, we weren't specifically targeting this deer, but he was always in the back of our minds, and one of those fringe deer that, if he would have shown up, he definitely would have been a deer that we'd have gone after and tried to get a shot at. He moved another quarter of a mile in 2012, and now he continued to move further and further away from that field where we first were seeing him back in 2009. So now he's another quarter of a mile to the west, and again, he was almost strictly nocturnal. We didn't get any daytime pictures of this deer. We got some nighttime pictures, and even though we hunted this area quite a bit that year, we didn't have any sightings of Lappy during the day. Okay, so I went and pulled the kill photo of that deer, and it looks like it was the 21st of December when I killed him in 2012. So that was the first daylight sighting that we'd had of that deer while hunting since 2009. Basically 4 whole seasons between daylight sightings of this buck. But Lappy was, I guess, 7 years old, to the best of my ability to estimate this deer. He had moved every single year, which is an important point to remember here, and he was almost entirely nighttime active. So that's that deer, and sometimes you're going to run into bucks like that. Maybe you're hunting a deer and he disappears and you think he's dead, or whatever the case may be. His core area may have just moved a little bit, like Lappy's did. I was lucky that even as he moved these years, I was still able to keep up with him, excuse me, because he stayed in places that I could hunt. Now I want to contrast the behavior of Lappy with the other buck that I hunted in 2012, and that was a deer that's well documented at Midwest Whitetail. In fact, we've probably talked about this deer more than any other, and I'm sure there will likely never be one that we talk about more. But his personality was so different, and his lifestyle was so different from Lappy, that it's fun to go back and revisit the double G4 buck. So they both started on the same field in 2009. The few sightings that we've got of those deer in daylight were in that more focused area. However, we did get 2 more daylight sightings of double G4 buck during the 2009 season. One was about a quarter of a mile to a half a mile away in one direction. The other sighting was about a half a mile or so in a different direction. So that's 2009. Didn't get him killed. Excited about the deer. Hunted him a lot. Couldn't wait until 2010 to go after him again. So 2010 arrives, and sometime in October, towards the middle to the latter part of October, I got a couple nighttime trail camera pictures of this buck back in the same area where we started with him in 2009. So we knew that he was still alive, and he became the #1 target. Now he'd grown probably 15 to 20 inches bigger. Looked really good on the trail camera photos. Excuse me. And I was just relentlessly hunting for this deer. I was trying to be careful, so as not to educate him, but I spent a lot of time in the area where I thought he lived. Was getting very few trail camera pictures of him. Anything that we did get was at night. Never got a single sighting during the 2010 season. Felt like I was hunting a ghost, and I can't remember how many days I put into that buck, 50 or 60 days straight of hunting that deer. Never saw him. So I was a little discouraged by the end of that season, as you might well imagine. 2011 comes, and I'm talking to my neighbor, and he had the sheds from the buck from 2010, and his property was probably almost 3/4 of a mile away, at least, maybe even further, to where he had the pictures of that, or the sheds from that deer. He figured he was upper 170s, high 170, 78, somewhere in that range during the 2010 season. So 2011, we always look for deer during the summer. And sometime towards the latter part of July, Greg was out filming one of the soybean fields, not too far from that original starting point, the same place where we saw the buck first in 2009, where I got the first trail camera pictures of him in 2010. And here's Greg filming this giant 6x5. And it took us a second to realize that it was that same deer, that he'd grown that much. He went from being about a 178-ish in 2010 to being, as we found out later with the sheds from him, somewhere in the 205, 206 range, mostly typical in 2011. So the hunt was on, but I was a little bit I wasn't as excited about it as I might have been if I'd hunted the deer and seen him the year before. So going into 2011, I'm thinking, it's just going to be another repeat of 2010. I'm going to hunt every single day for one deer, never see him. The season's going to end, and I'm going to be discouraged by what happened. But he was worth it, so I was committed to do that. The interesting thing on this deer, though, was now he's 6 years old, and his behavior had completely changed. 180-degree reversal from what he was like in 2010. Now he's totally daylight active, and it just seemed like he was a deer that at any given time you could go out and find him without even trying. He was the most visible deer on the farm in 2011, more visible than any other deer that we could identify. And he was living almost entirely on that same ridge where we first picked him up back in 2009. So where Lappy moved every year, 1/4 of a mile, this deer, his range and core area became more and more focused. So here we've got a small range. We're talking maybe 30 acres on this buck, whereas the year before, we don't even know for sure what his range was because he was so hard to find. Total reversal of his behavior. And age 6 was when that happened. And it seems to be a sort of trend that we run into when the bucks reach this full maturity. Some of them have this switch that flips, where they start moving during the day and they really start to become very killable. So he was totally killable, and I had a couple opportunities at him during that season and fumbled those opportunities. But fortunately, he made it through everything. We found his sheds in January or February, it might have been early February, I can't remember, late January. And went ahead and started running cameras on Trophy Rock the next summer in that same general area. Started getting some good summertime pictures in July, some full velvet, full-sized, full development shots of the deer probably in early August, I'm guessing, coming to the Trophy Rock. And that's a great way to get summer pictures. You can't be pouring corn out all the time and trying to get trying to get deer coming to corn. It's so expensive, and it's so intrusive, going in and out so often. So being able to put something like the trophy rock on a stump and set a camera nearby, you can pick up, you know, several weeks worth of photos, only have to make one trip in and out to get them. So anyway, that sets the stage for the 2012 season, and it was almost identical to 2011. The deer's range had continued to get smaller, and it was still on that same ridge. And the whole season was sort of a soap opera of you know, hunts and errors and sort of successes. And once again, it was very easy to find that buck, very daylight active, the easiest deer on the farm to hunt, basically. And I did end up killing him in early November. So the whole point of this is to go back and follow two deer of the same age that started in the same place, but their personalities completely diverged from that point onward. So keep in mind, I guess the lesson is that when you're hunting mature deer, you're not hunting a class of deer. You can't stereotype these animals. Once they get mature like that, you're hunting individuals. So you have to learn the individual personalities of those bucks. You learn all that stuff over the course of the years, and then finally, hopefully, they reach this full maturity, and now you've got a picture of this buck that you're hunting, and he becomes more killable. Hopefully that's the thing that we keep seeing, because there's a couple of them on the farm right now that we're hoping to see, you know, the same progression take place. But that's been the experience. Thought you'd get a kick out of these two bucks and how their lives diverged, and we ended up killing them both during the same season. So in conclusion, it's real simple. You got to hunt every mature buck as an individual. Well, that's it for the 2016 off-season series. Hope you've enjoyed it. We've had a lot of projects going, and we'll continue to show you the wrap-ups of some of these food plots and some of these projects when we come back again, starting towards the end of August, and start ramping up for the hunting season. Those episodes are always focused around picking the bucks that we're hunting, showing you what's on the farm, some of the things that we've done and are doing to get ready to hunt those deer, and hopefully we can talk about the personalities of some of those bucks as well. Well, I appreciate you joining me. We'll see you right back here again towards the end of August for the next episode of Midwest Whitetail, and remember to always dream big.